a group of Americans were asked who have been the most impactful Christians in America over the last 100 years. And if we had time in a room like this, I would have asked you who have been the most impactful Christians in Kenya over the last 60 or so years, just about since we got our independence. And when the Americans put their list together, that list had a lot of preachers. The Billy Grahams, the Oral Roberts were on that list. But hardly were there names of Christian professionals. And that tells me something. It tells me that as much as there are some professionals doing things, their message is not getting out there. And I hope that the guests who I have here with me today will help us to begin to look at the profession, at the marketplace, at the workplace as our areas of ministry. Thank you so much to each of you for joining us this afternoon. Asante sana. Let me get straight into it. And I think, let me start with the saying goes ladies first. So Sarah, I want to actually begin with you and hear this from you as well. Now, transformation is twofold in my own analysis. On one hand, in a workplace, I need to stand to ensure that the culture does not change me. But there are those who say then that a Christian needs to move to the next level, which is to begin to actively push back, to go on the offensive. Tell me a little bit about your journey, what you've done to stand, but also what are you doing now to push back, to begin to change the culture in your organization? Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Wahiga. My name is Sarah, as you've been told. I work for Kenya Power, and I want to apologize that there's been too much presence of the energy sector here, but we are not also apologizing about that because we thank God that we are part of Hesabika. What has my journey been like? I began, when I left the university, I was born again. And I think in a nutshell, I would say that my journey at my place of work has been that one of being so consistent and so clear of what I stand for, that within the work setup, within the Kenya Power setup, everybody knows that when an issue is on my desk, that is how the way it will end. They can almost predict it. And I think that is the part that I would want to say on issue of culture, that while true, institutions have some culture that is not very nice, a believer must have a culture that defines you. And I think everybody who passes under my supervision, we agree that you do not pass here and don't leave a mark. So you must do, especially on issues of diligence, that is my main issue. You must be diligent in what you do and do it well.
Do you ever get frustrated? Kenya Power is a huge organization. Do you ever feel like this little thing I'm doing, is it really going to change this organization? And how do you keep yourself motivated?
Kenya Power is a very huge institution. Actually, sometimes you are so sure that what I have put in place, like issues of integrity, you really think you have done it. Then one morning you wake up and you hear a story of a staff in Lamu, for example. Mm-hmm. So you feel like, is it really making an impact? But it doesn't frustrate me because I believe that in my area of surrounding, I must remain consistent and I must continue not only speaking, but doing things as a believer.
Thank you for that bold statement. Lenson, let me bring you in. Chair, Kenya Christian Lawyers Fellowship. I don't even know where to begin with you. I have so many questions. And I see I'm not alone. This year, lawyers have been on the spotlight. Many have been accused of aiding and abetting in the war on corruption, for example. I have had jokes by comedians, and I'm sorry to say this in a church, that I'm even looking for an appropriate way to say it, that those who do not go to heaven, there is a special place for those of the legal fraternity elsewhere. How do you, first of all, so that there's a perception out there, and I know you've had the jokes. I come from a family of lawyers, and they get very annoyed when those jokes are peddled out there. So tell me this. One, there's a culture that you found when you joined the legal profession that you have to stand against. But there's now you also seeking to change that. Can you give us specifics of things you've done, things you're hoping to do as the chair of the Kenya Christian Lawyers profession to be salt and light in this Kenya that we live in?
It's true, the perception is is deafening. But the truth is that the world needs legal services. Lawyers play a critical role in creating social cohesion. We've been accused of creating social disorder, but the reason why at times it may not be apparent that lawyers are important in a society is because we don't build bridges. We don't fix people who are sick and then they come out healed. Our role, I see it more as glue, a glue that is supposed to help cohesion. When you talk about dispute resolution, when you talk about making transactions possible, when you talk about diplomacy, lawyers are also quite involved in issues of diplomacy. When you talk about even family relations, lawyers play a critical role in terms of the rights of children, the rights of those who have been bereaved. So I never wanted to be a lawyer myself. But when I got through my dad's advice and started practicing law, I realized that there is indeed need for lawyers. Now, the challenge has been that where all of us as practitioners are also in spaces of a lot of temptation. For instance, some of my members are judges. And because some of the transactions, the disputes they preside over have high value in terms of subject matter, the value is high. And there's also a lot of vested interest, stakes are high. So they find themselves in positions where they are tempted. But also lawyers play a role in tempting them, and lawyers are complicit through their clients in also being a conduit for corruption. However, in my own view, there are a number of lawyers who are doing the right thing, who are causing positive transformation. I was having a conversation with a friend recently, and I told them, as lawyers, we are in such a position of advantage or privilege, because when a client comes to me, they trust whatever I tell them. And if I was to tell them that for this case is so serious that for us to find a solution, we need to go and see some muganga in Tanzania who has the kind of potion that we need to find a cure for this, to find the solution for this case, the client will believe me. If I tell them that, look, on this case, we need to bribe a judge for us to get the solution, the client will also believe me. Or to bribe a registrar, the client will also believe me. So because we as Christian lawyers are also in that position of power or privilege, then what we have been trying to build resource within our membership is to appreciate that we can actually use that power responsibly and begin to be the change that we want to see in small disputes, big transactions, small transactions. We can begin to be the kind of salt and light that is needed. So you asked me, what have we done as Christian Lawyers Fellowship? I think one of the things that I am personally very keen about is young lawyers, because they are still at a very, the Swahili saying, samaki mkunja angali mbichi, isn't it? That they're still at a place where they can be shaped to avoid the mistakes that we made. So we have begun deliberate efforts of reaching them at the campus level. A number of them are here today because some of our colleagues sponsored them. Some of the fellowship members sponsored them to be here. We have also reached them at the School of Law because usually there are about 200 to 300 lawyers in the Christian unions, but when they come out to the market, we lose them somehow. So we want to bring them close. The last thing that I would say, among the things that we are doing, is we have also tried to have more Christian lawyers in the judiciary, and also in areas of public office. But our challenge for our members is always that while we send you there as an ambassador, you really have to validate our values and actually demonstrate the hope and the difference that we want to see.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Let me also bring in Dr. Kizito, who I see he has been scribbling some notes, which I hope he'll share with us at this time. Dr. Let me start with something that happened back in 2004, and you can answer the same question that they've answered. There's a former Arkansas governor, Mike Huckabee. He was speaking in a forum just like this one, and he said that instead of focusing on making more money or making a name, Christians should determine the most important thing in their life, be ready to sacrifice their comfort so that somehow God can use their life to touch someone else for eternity. This topic that we're looking at right now is transforming your profession. What cost have you paid to transform your profession? Do you feel you're on the road to transforming, and what more do you wish you could do?
Thank you for that question. And for the audience listening to me and seeing me, I'll try and bring you into a consultation space and try and see whether you can follow me. The transformation of healthcare in Kenya is at the heart of every family, because they have either lost someone, they have someone suffering, they have a need, and it touches either on their economics, touches on just their futures. Therefore, when they're suffering, they look at the healthcare workers and they don't differentiate between the doctor, the cleaner, the nurse. So the space I'll try and address is the doctor's space, because I chair the Christian Medical Fellowship. So when we were students, there were no doctors in some far-flung areas. Even up to now, the well-served areas are around the towns and a few of the mission hospitals. So we undertook to go out of our way to those places without pay. So at a personal level, I've gone to Garissa, I've worked there. I went to Turkana, where we were 2 doctors working there.
What do you mean without pay? How were you surviving?
We have a ministry that was called Sheepfold. So as students, there are no doctors there. So you go to work for a period of 3 months or whatever duration, and there will be no remuneration. Yeah, you're just going there to serve the people. In the process, you develop some values, some resilience within you to go to another place which is more harder. So by doing that, you set an example, you role model. So other people go there. So you are going there primarily because you are a believer and not because of other motives. So I worked in Turkana for 3 years, and I've been in government for 20 years now. While people resign, in the same job group for 12 years. Those are the personal costs. But now for the medics, the students, because I cannot touch the whole country, cannot touch all the doctors. So I work within this fellowship where we decided we will mentor. And how do we mentor? We work with those young people. I've started, whether in my high school, work with some students, whether in the medical schools, and we work with them. And mentoring is holistic, because the profession also has that inbuilt in it. When you are in first year or in second year, you work with your professors, with the senior colleagues. So as we work with them, they see our challenges, they see the dilemmas, okay. And healthcare has a lot of stresses. And as I told you, I'll take you through the consultation. So the doctors are the only ones who, when they're about to sleep or to eat a meal, when you call them, you are telling them, daktari sijaenda choo, daktari ni nahara. Those are the good news you give them. When he's supposed to be asleep at 4 a.m., he's the only one you are waking up, telling him, daktari niko na uchungu. When he comes to the ward and our people do not know how to care for their sick, they come and dump them in the hospitals, especially the public hospitals. So we face the patients at their most dire moments, when they are dying, when they are soiled, when they are at the worst state, the difficult of the wounds. So that's our environment. And when we come out, the mindset is that we charge too much. So because somebody charges a particular amount of money, we assume all doctors charge that much. So while we are serving the public, the mindset of the people is that we are exploiting them, whereas the bulk of us serve selflessly. Okay. So the cost we've had to pay is do that and walk along with some people and see that manifest in within our time.
Okay.
Yes.
And I want to let all of you know that this session will be a bit different in that I'll try and open up for some questions, so I hope you're thinking about them. But Sarah, let me come back to you. Have you ever been compelled to stand by your convictions no matter what? As you think about your time at Kenya Power, is there a specific example you can give us where you say, this one could have got me in a lot of trouble, could have cost my job, could have cost something?
Yeah, actually.
And how did you maneuver in that situation?
I've not only worked at Kenya Power. I have worked in I worked with government, ministry, and then I also worked with a private organization. And at one time, because of my conviction as a believer, I actually was sent on compulsory leave. And the reason was because of I think the morning team talked about putting in place procedures and company policies. Most organizations in Kenya have very nice policies and very nice procedures. The problem is adhering to them. So we had a situation where I needed to do something that was contrary to the company procedure. And I just said, no, I'll not do it because the procedure doesn't allow that. I was actually supposed to sack an employee. So I said, I'll not sack that employee because we've not taken him through the normal procedure of hearing, disciplinary procedure. So, and I didn't realize that it was that serious, And then for those of you who are students in engineering, most engineers think you are indispensable. And you think you are so critical, nobody can send you on compulsory leave. And because you're the one holding the machines, you're the one causing them to move. So I was told at around 9:30, oh, you haven't yet given that officer his letter. I said, yeah, I haven't because we haven't taken him through the disciplinary hearing. And the human resource manager tells me, okay, how many leave days do you have? I told him I have 45. He said, take all of them. And I'm like, oh, who am I handing over the office to? He says, don't bother about who you're handing over the office to. Just go home. And I realized why I'm going home is because I tried to stand for justice. And I think that is what has been my, call. We must treat all employees fairly. And the only thing that gives us that opportunity is going by the company procedures. Let everybody be exposed to the same path. So I went home, and 45 days, including weekends, becomes really long. So it was then the reality came. Fortunately or unfortunately, when I went back, during my leave, that I got another job. So when I went back, I did not have too much room. I was going back like a hero, So I didn't have the opportunity of now proving myself as a believer in a humbling situation, because now I was going to hand over my resignation.
What did that situation... You can clap for her. What did that situation do to your faith, your belief that God takes care of his own? How did it strengthen you so that if you have to do it again, do you feel you're now more confident in having to make such decisions?
That's really, by the way, that time I was much younger. I was like maybe 6 years after leaving college in employment. And that gave me the confidence to stand by what I believe. Because God actually provided for me. How I got the next job was just the Lord doing it. And that gave me the confidence, even now in the employment that I moved on to next, that what I believe in is that let's give everybody an equal opportunity. Let's give every person in the company, be it a sweeper in the organization or a manager, let's all be exposed to the same level of treatment. And that hasn't been very nice. In one other office, by the way, I was literally almost being thrown out simply because of unfairness in employment. And I was on the panel. So I was like, no, if we are going to take this one with this grade, then we will not have a reason to drop this other one for that grade. And of course, that makes people uncomfortable because what happens in many organizations, and this is, I think across the country, is that when we are on a panel for employing, we should be discussing of who have you brought, you know? So you bring one person who has seconded who, but what about those ones who are just applying? They too have an equal opportunity. And to me, that is the Christian walk. It's not very popular to many people, but that is a Christian walk. That the Lord has called us to be fair, to actually live a just life. Yeah.
Amen. Powerful there. And Nelson, you can respond to what she said, but I also want to play a few scenarios for you and get your thoughts on this. A client walks into your office, contracts you to be his or her lawyer, and over time, as they share with you the circumstances, you begin to see culpability in wrongdoing on their part. You know how they can get out of it, but you can sense that there is something wrong here. Now, in the law, I believe there is a client, something privilege. You don't have to share. In fact, the police can't really come for you. We can look at other workplaces. I work in a different workplace where a boss is sexually harassing some of my colleagues. It doesn't affect me directly, but I'm a Christian. What do? I work in a workplace where I know fellow journalists are taking bribes. It doesn't affect me directly, but what do? How do you navigate through such scenarios? Have you ever faced such a situation?
Yes, I have. First of all, lawyers are considered officers of the court. So it's actually wrong for you to lie to the court. However, I agree with you that we are faced with circumstances where we know that our client is culpable, but then we still represent them. And the question is...
And you do a good job of it.
Yes, we do. And the question is, how are you putting forward their position? Because all of us were guilty and condemned to die, and Christ then became our advocate, paid the price with his blood. So there is a case to make for advocates being playing the role of representing the guilty.
And you don't see an ethical problem there?
The lady,
you said representing the guilty.
The guilty, yes.
So you know they're guilty.
They're guilty. The lady who came.
Let him explain himself.
The lady who was brought before Christ, caught in the act, was guilty. Absolutely guilty, isn't it? But then Christ spoke a higher truth about her story. So we also do ministry through KCLF. We do ministry in prisons, and there is a lot to say about Christ and the church not giving up on the society. However, I don't think that we should go to court and lie. I think it is right for you to find a basis to defend your client on facts that are true. However, there are other cases where our client is clearly wrong, and there are certain cases which our legal aid of KCLF will not handle because of what they represent. For instance, we have a hard time representing the people who have been accused of rape. We have a hard time. However, there are some lawyers within the Christian lawyers profession who will not have a problem, because you remember Joseph in the Bible was accused of attempted rape. So everybody is deserving of his side of the story being told. We were condemned as sinners by our action. We were guilty when our first father, Adam, committed sin. And it is true we're guilty, but there's also a side of the story that Christ came and died for us. So when you go to court, you tell your client truth from the side of the fact that you are presenting you're using the law and the evidence to present his side of the truth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Wow, a lot of ethical dilemmas there to navigate. Dr. Kizito, what is one thing you'd say you are proud of as the chair of the Kenya Medical Practitioners Fellowship that they've achieved? He's spoken about what Christian Lawyers Fellowship, there are certain cases as lawyers they don't touch, the legal aid. Those ones they say these ones are rather difficult. When you think about highlights of the time you spent chairing this organization, what is one or two things you can say, we did this? And I feel like it not only impacted us positively, but also society as well, because we're here talking about transforming the profession to transform the world. Can you think of any examples?
Yeah, I'll give a few, although you said one.
Two.
The first Hesabika, as a baby, we are part of the people nurturing it. Without overstating, including that these hands were a picture taken of medical students at Kabarak.
Okay.
And the brand, we're part of it. I'm sure Richard remembers. So in terms of what are we doing, thinking how do we change the workplace and the profession, because healthcare is very, very sensitive. Sorting out the strike that was long, all of you are familiar with what was happening those 100+ days. The team that helped sort out the impasse from where things were when the president was declaring war on the doctors were members of my board, sitting with key church leaders and talking which are the way forward and putting the other proposal on the table with the lawyers, the senior counsel that were present. So in terms of that space,
yes,
as Kenya Christian medics, that is in terms of bringing a solution where there is a crisis.
I want to interrupt you there because I don't just move to the next point. A question has come up as you said that. How did your members navigate between fighting for the rights of doctors, which is their right, but also you're a Christian and you know that if I stay away from my hospital, somebody will die?
Yeah, and
those are discuss that.
Yeah, those are the ethical dilemmas. So as we sit here, we all assume that the vocation of the doctor is to attend to you, come what may. It doesn't matter. And so we, as a fellowship, we actually meet here at Baptist every other month. So we had this discussion, candid. Why are you on strike? What are the issues? Why was the strike called? That's why we became part of the solution as well. There are many issues in Kenya's health sector, financing, human resource, that will be mind-boggling if I mention any here. Mm-hmm. So even now, the situation is worse than when there's a strike in some places. And you saw the other day they blacklisted hundreds of facilities. They said they should be closed. That means whatever service that is being offered there is not worth anything. It's more harmful than good to the people of Kenya. So when the person working there raises up their hand and says, wait a minute, this should stop, that person is on the positive side.
So you see a greater good.
Yes, they are stopping to work for a greater good. And we sought solace and got it from the prophets and how they would address such issues. So as a profession, the Bible is our basis of what we talk about. So we were on strike, and some people are saying, I want to go and offer a service here. So we challenged ourselves. Are we with the people striking or are we not? Why is the strike? So we engaged the union leaders who are our friends and discussed these are the issues. Are these issues valid? Then government officials, who do we talk to? So that around the strike, that's what I would say. But the people would think these doctors are going on strike because of the money. But they don't know there is a bigger devil out there around the healthcare. And that has never been brought to the public limelight. The issues of now you're seeing the 20-what billion lost medical equipment license and leasing. So those are the questions that are being asked. The counties have challenges, and as Christians, we speak into it, but not at that level only. Some of our members are managers. Okay. Some of them are working in those remote places. They may not be recognized, but we also support them. So as the chair, what you've gone up is to create fellowships, chapters, So we have a chapter in Eldoret, we have a chapter in Nakuru, and we have linked them with students because they need support. And then we have also begun some leadership and just capacity building to resource them, because these people need help. They work in high-stress setups. So you may not understand me, but my colleagues seated there and the other one and the other one, they know what we work through. When they give me a call, when they visit with me, they know what I'm facing. So that's what we have grown as a fellowship.
And that's something that you're proud of.
Very proud of it.
And thank you to each of my panelists for sharing unique insights from each of their professions. I'll come back to you to figure out from you, how can we strengthen professions, Christian professional groups, and what can you tell those who do not have Christian professional groups within where they work? But I want to open it up for some questions. And I don't know who will move around with a microphone. Just fire those hands up. I'm sure you might have questions to them about their professions, or within your space as well, something that you think you could draw experience from.
Okay, thank you. My question goes to Wakili. As a Christian body within the legal fraternity, how are you influencing the laws and the policies that we see made every day, and some of them are not good at all? Thank you.
My name is Mbulu Philip. I'm a third-year student, University of Nairobi. I must say that I once treasured to do law, but I'm offended. And it's very, to be honest, from the comments I've heard from the KCLF chair, they were meant from very brilliant point of view and very honest. But I must say this. One of the very misused provisions of the Constitution, 52, I think, that my client should be presumed innocent until otherwise is proved. I've seen it being misused by some greedy lawyers around to get economic philanders out of the tentacles of the court. My question is just this simple. At what point did lawyers lose the public shame that it's not about the legal fees, it's substance? Because we've seen guys...
I think you've asked your question. Thank you. Does anyone have a question for one of the other panelists? For one of the other panelists? Okay, let's get one more.
I'm Rosalind Kihumba. I'm a social scientist. And my question is related to what our medical profession had talked about, that there are quite some information we as public do not have that could really do a lot of good if we would understand. And that was even coming out during our discussion around youth employment. Is there a possibility that such associations could be putting more information outside there so that we as public would also move with them, so that we are able to understand so many things that are happening and going positively for our country, for the good of our country?
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Kizito, I think let me start with you. Nelson, yours is a tough one. Let me give you a chance to think about it.
Okay. One of the things I'll encourage is usually you go to people who you have trust or confidence in. So one of the things we've encouraged is when you have an issue, health-related issue, seek out a doctor or a professional in that space who has values. We try and refer or recommend. That's one. But in the process, the consultation experience is meant to be two-way. It's meant to be an exchange of where you are, some common plan, and that's the opportunity that's supposed to be used to give you information that you require. So for example, we have a challenge around the vaccines. I'm sure you saw about the other vaccines that were happening. So when you get a professional who has those values, they'll explain to you, this is good for you, this one you have these choices, you want to do family planning, take this may not be helpful, and these are the facilities you can visit, these ones not yet. So that's one approach. The other is when we have our events, networking and partnering at that level, we are able to inform you. Of course, there is information that is government in those spaces. Some of it they may not allow to get out until they have appended signatures. But for those who work in those spaces, they will easily tell you, this one, although it's being pushed, it's not good for us. It's just the same way, let me divert, go to, when they wanted to put Jomo Kenyatta International Airport under AQ, and people have to shout, and then say, no, this is not good until people stop. So there are such things that happen in health care. The information, some of it is technical, but the simple one you can get from the person who is nearest to you.
Let me add to her question, and you can answer this briefly. When matters such as abortion, contraceptives, etc., comes to the public light, does the Christian Medical Fellowship respond to them? And in times when you've responded, do you feel like the news gets out there, or some also say media are culprits in this as well? But do you have press releases? Do you share? Because that could be one way that people like her could know that you are there and you have a voice and you have an opinion as well. What has happened in the past?
So on a selfish level, I'm glad that you're here, because next time I make a phone call, I'll be given that platform. But we've done that. There were 2-3 times I've gotten access. I know Citizen TV or wherever. We have had media briefing. There were times, the one that I remember most was when there were some people from the House of Commons from UK. They were coming to hold a meeting, and we held a press meeting, and some radio stations presented it. The pro-life movement, which we are all familiar with, we have PLMT, which is our baby, and you are familiar with Dr. Jean Kagia. I'm sure you know Professor Ngumi. So those are the things we've done. And then with KCLF, well, the predecessor was called Anne. We have engaged in that space, including in courts when they need an opinion, which is touching on health professionals. We've given that opinion, and it has helped. So when you are talking about abortion, all the things surrounding it, the lobbying space where the church needs to have lots of presence, we just realized that the same way that they say Kenya is 80% Christian, the same way people, not all Christians, in quotes, will be against abortion. So it's what we do as CMF, we are pro-life. We have structures in place for pro-life. We participate in pro-life activities. Even now we have the Kyotas, the houses that we can house those young girls who are in that crisis. So that's what we are doing. So what you could do is highlight those stories. And when you need the voice from CMF, we have members who will come and speak.
Thank you for that. Nelson, 2 questions. One, what can the Kenya Christian Lawyers Fellowship do about laws that are passed out there that, that would go against our faith, for example? And another one, they're asking, he said, when did lawyers lose the plot? I don't know if you would agree with that all lawyers have lost the plot, but he's concerned that possibly a significant portion of members of the legal fraternity seem to be going contrary to what is legal, what is ethical, etc. You can respond.
All right. So as Dr. Chisanya has said, there is judgment law, which is what happens in the courts. When there is a case presented for certain practices to be determined upon by the court, such as abortion, the right of LGBTQs, issues of issues of sex and all that. There is, and also, the issue about the curriculum, sex education curriculum. So there are certain aspects that, as lawyers, we have the courts. We can do. We've been doing what you call judicial lobbying through the courts, so that then you are able to get court decisions that pronounce Christian values. Because what the courts do is that they interpret the statute and the constitution and all the other laws of the country. And we say that the constitution gives a skeleton, but the courts, through their decision, the constitution and and the laws that we pass as legislation, they provide the skeleton of what our laws are. But the judges feed in the flesh with how they interpret the law. So those have been opportunities for us to partner with professionals like doctors as KCLF, but later on we have now opened it up through KCPF to do joint lobbying or judicial activism. you've seen how Okiya Mtata has been very effective through judicial activism. So our new legal dispensation allows for that. Yeah.
Is he a member of your fellowship?
No, he is not. Okay. but I think a good man. He's done a lot of good. But I think we as lawyers, this is one thing I don't think we've done sufficiently to monitor the laws that are being passed in Parliament and to actually speak on them. There is opportunity for all of us, but especially lawyers, to actually come out through the public hearings and give your views before any law is passed into an act. Any bill is passed into an act. So that's an area that I don't think as KCLF and KCPF we've done sufficient to ensure that we are monitoring all the laws that are being passed in Parliament. The previous time when we had the referendum, we were very active in trying to ensure that we help Christians understand the pros and cons of not just Christians, actually the whole public.
Okay.
Then the second question by Mr. Mbolu, I understand. While I understand your frustration, if you to think about the 90s and the 80s, there was detention without trial, and we all decried that as a very dangerous precedent or practice, because what happens is, if today I come and say that Mbolu is a murderer, it means that we should convict you without putting you through the trial process. The assumption of guilty until proven innocent raises the burden of proof and says that there is a certain threshold for us to hold those who are accusing you. Actually, it's wrong to give a false account of your neighbor, isn't it? It's one of the commandments. So we are raising the bar to ensure that anyone who accuses you actually meets that bar. When I was doing, through the legal aid program of KCLF, we visit the prisons a lot. And I'll tell you from my own assessment, almost 70% of the people, 60-70% of the people behind bars are actually there because they couldn't afford representation. They're innocent. But a lot of the people who are supposed to be in there are out here because the system is rigged. Okay? So because our kingdom is about justice and righteousness, when we are saying that this person is a thief, he has stolen a cow, can we first say, why do you say so? Why do you accuse this person of having stolen a cow?
Okay.
Please provide your evidence to this level so that then we can say, and this standard should be the same for the poor as well as the rich. Yeah? It should be the same. I don't think that the government has done enough on legal aid. I think even as Christian lawyers, we have not done sufficient on legal aid. So there's still a lot of room for Mbolu and his colleagues to make the difference that I haven't made. I still encourage you to do law, because where there is darkness is where light is needed.
Thank you. A very good point there. And I like that you spoke about the criminalizing of poverty and that the poor do not get the justice that the rich would be able to access. I see our time is far gone. Maybe I can take one more from each section.
My name is James Nyawira, a student of medicine. My question goes to my chairman, and it concerns the question of the private practice and public practice for the doctors. Because oftentimes we see that our doctors are so rare in the public hospital, and most of them are engaged in the private hospitals. And I wonder, as a Christian coming out, what should we be expecting, and how can we give the amount of hours that we expected to the government facilities if we go there, even thinking about the private practice? Thank you.
My name is Marceline Okello. I'm a consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers Limited. Now, I'm not so old in my career journey, but increasingly I'm facing confrontation with quite a number of atheists in the workplace. And maybe Sarah can take this. What are some of the insights that you can share with us on how to meaningfully engage atheists, ensuring that we help them see the truth about the faith that we uphold, but also listening to their viewpoint without getting swayed?
That's a very good question. Sarah, how can we engage atheists in the workplace. And can I add another group? Disillusioned Christians and cynical Christians in the workplace. They were once of the faith, now they want nothing to do with it. How can we engage them? Please note that. We want to get one. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Rachel Wamboi. I'm a lawyer by profession. 1 Corinthians 13 provides us with characteristics of love, that it is patient and kind, and it also tells us that it rejoices in truth and does not rejoice in iniquity or evil. I think for Christian professionals, and my question would go to my senior, Mr. Shiteva, for Christian professionals, how do we get to strike the balance whereby we are patient and kind, but at the same time, we are not ashamed to stand for the truth? Because I feel there is an imbalance where you're either a softie, so you're patient and kind, but you do not get to stand for the truth, or when you stand for the truth, you end up being a very angry and very staunch person that becomes very unpleasant to people. So then it ends up affecting your testimony.
You are in the right profession. Good question. All right, let's get one here.
Thank you. My name is Peter Wasaga, a student at Kenya School of Law. And my question would go to my senior, Mr. Shitiva. I want to pick your mind on the issue. You had reservations on representation of rape, people accused of rape. Now with the Cabranc rule, I want you to please expound to me why you discriminate.
What rule is that?
Cabranc, this is a rule that prohibits discrimination of clients. And just to elaborate on this, there was this quote by Justice Lenaola, that it is better to acquit a guilty person than convict an innocent person. And also, I want to just ask a question also to the Daktari. What is your position with regards to human papillomavirus vaccine? And number 3, as I sit down...
That was your last question.
The last one, undercutting.
I'm going to call you out.
Undercutting with regards, advocates are prohibited against undercutting. Now, what about this? What about these guys who are not able to raise money to defend a suit? How are you really going about their cases?
My name is Nagea Daido. I'm a lawyer. Mr. Shitiva, I have many things to do.
Many things to ask?
Yeah, to answer from.
One or
okay,
two?
No, I'm asking one, but he has had many questions for him. My question is regarding to the academia. Our professors are the ones who really shape the students and the lawyers who come out. And in law school, campus and post-campus, they normally tell us there should be a separation of law and religion. And your faith, you shouldn't put it in your practice as a scholar and a distinguished person. So how do you go about it if the distinguished scholars say that you shouldn't put your faith in the practice? Thank you.
Thank you. I must say I'm loving the questions, very intelligent questions coming from our audience. I can see a group here ready to change their professions in the world. Who is ready to tackle? I don't want to pick. I don't know who's ready to go with their set of questions. Sarah, I think let's hear from you first.
I've been quiet for a while, so I can...
go right ahead.
And I like what is coming to a lawyer because he sponsored them to come, so...
Nicely put.
Well, on the issue raised about our faith and our place of work, just a quick one. A month ago, I had a privilege to be in a class, a conference room with many people from different countries. And our facilitator says different countries have different cultures. For example, in Kenya, people pray before they begin meetings. And the others found it so weird. How? In fact, somebody from Ghana said, there's no way they're ever going to develop. I kept quiet, watched him, but by the end of it, it was like, yeah, let people do their thing. If Kenyans like to pray before they begin their meetings, not every country, by the way, does that. So how do we marry our faith? Because the atheists are coming to say that because they are saying, so why the Christian? Earlier on in the morning, we were asked a question of some faiths where you make somebody a chairman or an MD, and before long, people of that faith are the main people in the office. And maybe I just want to say that for us as believers, it is good for us to strengthen our fellowships, but it's very critical to watch how we do our work. All these other faiths are using the believer, the Christian believer, as a benchmark. We must never forget that. And the big challenge that I think we're having today is that when we finish the fellowship at lunchtime and we get to the office, it's very difficult to separate a document written by a believer and the one written by the drunk, the one who came to work drunk, or the atheist. I really want to ask, especially the younger generation, that we put diligence in our work. That is our calling. The Bible tells us the earth and all that is in it is the Lord's. Is God, is our Father's thing. So whatever assignment you have been given, whether you are an accountant, whether you are an HR person, social scientist, you have been given that assignment by God. And we are not going to win the war, by the way, by just praying. We have to change the way we do our work. We have to do our work with some seriousness. It hurts me a lot when I see a believer leave the desk when they have not attained the assignment they were given for the day. Your supervisor is seated waiting for a document, and you actually walk out, or you just hand it over without any seriousness. And you don't feel bad that people have to go through your work again. We are not going to be effective that way because people are looking for anything small to say why Christians are not doing it. They are looking for everything small to say why we should throw away Christianity talks from our place of work. So we are the ones who are defending the faith in our place of work. I hope I've answered, but the advice I would put is let's not only talk about Christianity, let's live it.
Amen.
If it's integrity, let it be found in you. That even the time you take at work, there's integrity in it. It's not only stealing money.
Mm-hmm.
When we do you come to work after time. When you say you are working from home, you are actually not working. When you finally deliver the report, everybody in the boardroom is saying, oh, it was done by so-and-so. That one must be redone. Then we actually let down our own cause.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think you've tackled that very well. Go ahead. Your proteges had questions for you, amongst others.
All right. Regarding the question of the academia world, I think that, Darwin, when he came up with the crazy evolution theory, he had his basis to say whatever truth he believed in. I don't think as Christians we should be shackled to believe that what Darwin said, what Newton said, what Einstein said is the ultimate truth. I don't think anybody has stopped us from saying our truth and validating our truth. I think as a Christian lawyer, when you have jurisprudence that you think confirms your faith or is based on your faith, write it, publish it, speak it out, find forums to justify or to validate your argument. Because we should not blame others for using their strategies. Nobody stops us from also advancing our own. So let's not be held back by what other people have published. Let's also publish our own. And let's not be afraid to say that it is based on Christian values and principles. I don't think there should be any room for that. I think the academia is broad enough to accommodate all views, including Christian views. Regarding the motive for why we do what we do, I think we should be careful not to let anger and bitterness dilute the fruit of the Spirit. Because when we are in our workplace or doing public work, ultimately we will be judged by the fruit of the Spirit. By the fruit, we will know that you are a Christian. So, and it is important because at times when you get carried away by anger and bitter emotion, then you actually lose the audience that you are addressing. And if you do whatever it is that we do, and it is not based on love, even if we give our bodies, we give up hefty salaries and say, look, it's all like an empty gong, isn't it? So we must always remember, why is it that we do what we do? What is our motive? And for us to always keep our motive in check, then we need to spend time with God. We need to spend time with the Holy Spirit. That is how we ensure that we are still, we've not fallen off the rails. My brother, regarding discrimination of clients, I personally don't discriminate. I listen to your truth, and I try my best to present your truth. Except that I was speaking about our organization as Christian Lawyers Fellowship. As Christian Lawyers Fellowship, we have certain pockets of the society that we have a lot more compassion for, and especially children, as well as single mothers and widowed mothers, persons. So that is an area. We have limited resources. So because of that, then we focus on the target groups which we have greatest compassion for. And by the way, it includes Muslims. In Mombasa, our office, actually about 60% of our clients in our Mombasa office are Muslim clients. And then regarding fees, it is an individual choice, because there are some matters that we, at an individual level, offer pro bono services. But there are other matters where we believe the client can afford, and they're just not being willing to pay fees. And there are other matters where we refer to organizations that we know are better suited to offer them free legal service. Some firms take part, they don't offer any pro bono work, any pro bono services, but they take part of their fees and give in support of other organizations that do pro bono, like Kituo cha Sheria and Clear Kenya.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Kizito, let's wind up with you.
Thank you. I want to just mention one thing around the Bible and religion and law. In medicine, doctors often don't want to put those two things together. But we have found solace in referring to the Bible as one of the texts, as one of the most published books and literature. So you can actually start from there and use it as a strategy to refer to it. That wasn't my question, but I was just trying to bring it up. Private practice and public practice. It would interest you to know that many of us seated here who work in public sector, we do much more. We go the extra mile. So I would encourage you and the rest to walk along with some of the senior colleagues, because that's the role modeling that we are encouraging. Some of the people who work in Kenyatta, those provincial hospitals, they do extra work, hours into the night. There are times I sleep after midnight. There are days I have not seen by my family. So I wouldn't say that, just that it's quoted too much and people think that's what happens. There's a space for doing part private, part public. And you heard what Nganga was saying. Government expects you to do 8 hours, and the rest of your hours you can do with whatever you please. So I can't condemn some of those people, but I expect them to be present. So our members are encouraged to demonstrate, to exhibit those values. When they are not doing it, then we have those groups which are accountability groups, which then I can ask, hey, I was told you are called, you did not respond, I was told you're doing this, what's happening? In the process, you then develop a lower standard of living, so you don't have to live large, because you also don't necessarily have lots of that money. But then how do you do that if you are not in that space? I was asked to talk about HPV, and my response to that is, at present, I think HIV is a worse crisis for us as a country, because the funding that was coming in is not there. The staff across the country has been cut down. So when you look at the monies needed, you are asking yourself, now the HPV vaccine will only address 2-3 things among 20, 50 strains. So yes, it's a need, but when you look at the hierarchy of needs, it doesn't feature there. Is it useful? Yes. But then what has preceded it have been things that were not helpful for the Kenyan public. So there have been efforts to bring in things that are not good. So who is supposed to ensure there is confidence in the process, call on because the faith-based institutions are stakeholders. We have professionals who are from those institutions. You build consensus by giving them facts, being transparent, not pushing something. So when they push it, usually the first instinct is to withdraw and tell people this is not the right thing. Mm-hmm. So that's what I am seeing. They're running with it without, like the Huduma number. Yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing. Otherwise, it's a good thing. If it's a good thing, then carry everybody along. And I'm not in that space now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you felt there was no public participation on this?
It's not well done. You don't bring stakeholders, all stakeholders, and then you say why you're doing it. And when you're bringing it, you have not left a more pressing thing. Like now, for the sake of this audience, when the USAID and the rest stopped funding blood donation, testing for HIV, so the whole country, the viral issues, just the infection issues, are high and high. And that is it's not being talked about. And yet we need money there, we need effort there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And let's give them a big round of applause. Before I allow them to get off, I just want to respond to someone who asked a question about atheists in the office. And that's something I go through every day. The media profession is a profession of free thinkers. And this week I recalled, as you asked that question, I was moderating a China-Africa conference in Westlands. And I bring it up because my co-host was Chinese. And so when we were about to begin, I noticed how nervous she was. It was her first time to be on a stage talking to so many people. And I asked her, can we pray before we start? And she's just come in. She had landed from China 2-3 days ago. And she looked quite surprised. And the first thing she told me is, I'm an atheist, but I don't have a problem. If you want to pray, we can pray. And I peeped. She closed her eyes. I wanted to see, will she close or she'll continue looking around? And we prayed together. It did two things. One, for me, it was a declaration to her that I'm a Christian. But two, now it meant that I had to be accountable. I had to work hard so that because she's going back to China next week, when she goes back, she knows there's one, a Christian, who's hopefully a good moderator, but who's also a hard worker. And so for the next 2 days, as we did the program with her, I needed to be very aware and give 100%. I'm not saying she's now born again. I'm not saying she said anything like that. But by the time we were done, I think she saw faith and work in action. And maybe that's one way to begin in the workplace, for people of such beliefs. I want to thank each of my panelists. We've had from the energy sector, the legal profession, and the medical profession as well. We've had Sarah Wepuhulu from Kenya Power, also within the engineers profession. Let's give her Engineers Fellowship a round of applause. Nelson Ashitiva on the hot seat, tackling the hard questions. The chair of the Kenya Christian Lawyers Fellowship, and of course, Dr. Kizito Shisanya, the chair of the Christian Medical Fellowship as well. We hope you have some insights. I now hand back to our MC, who is also one of our panelists, to take us through to the next session. Thank you.